out there. All right. Please join me in welcoming Candice Zakariya, a former educator turned web developer dedicated to empowering women in tech to code and monetize their skills through personal branding. As the creator of the 14-day LinkedIn Writing Challenge and the founder of Anchor Web Studios, Candice is passionate about bridging the gap between coding and entrepreneurship. With her expertise in web development and marketing, she's here to inspire and guide you on your coding journey. Welcome, Candice, everybody.
Hey, thank you so much for that warm welcome. I am so glad to see you all ready on this Thursday. We are in the like Linda said, the Friday Eve, and that is a good way to look at it, right? We are half full people here, and I love that. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and get started. So for those of you that were here last week, we started with our Unlocking the Mysteries of Web Dev Basics for Aspiring Developers. That's where we started. But as I shared with you, as soon as you develop a project, you are a developer. So that's why we have the aspiring marked out. Okay. So even if maybe this is your first time coding, you are in a good place still. We have resources for you so that you can get the code from last week. And I'll share a little bit more about that in just a moment. But as Linda shared, my name is Candice Zakariya, and I started my professional web development journey in October of 2022. Basically, after a long period of burnout, I decided that I wanted to jump back into web development because in 2018, I happened upon some web development and really enjoyed it and decided that I was going to be a self-taught developer. And then I hit JavaScript. Okay, so last week we talked a lot about what it means to be a developer and the terms, the syntax, and all those things that come about when you are talking about actually programming and creating and developing with code. And so before we move into that, I just want to share a little bit more about my struggle with JavaScript. Okay, so what's interesting is I mentioned that I'm a former teacher. I love school. I love learning. And if I can be 100% honest with you, I never had an issue with learning anything until I decided that I wanted to learn JavaScript. And I'm not telling you this because I expect that you're going to have that same struggle. But one of the things that we have to remember when we go into our coding journey, especially if we're brand new, oftentimes we may hit bumps along the road, but that doesn't mean that it's not for you. It just means that maybe you need to find some creative ways to learn or to gather more resources. And this is kind of off script. I decided to do this last minute, but I'm on LinkedIn and there's post here that I wrote 9 months ago. And it is talking about how I struggled with JavaScript and how I realized that as an older learner, I had to find some creative ways. And so I wrote this post, and a lot of people could really resonate with it. But one thing that I want to share before we jump into talking about the review of last week, and as we jump into JavaScript, that there are 3 resources that I'd like to share with you. And I would say more like tips and hacks if you are wanting to pursue a coding career. So number 1 is use online platforms. There are plenty out there like Code Academy, Free Code Camp, Scrimba. We have Women Who Code. There's lots of organizations that have courses, they have boot camps. And so sometimes you just got to find the place that fits where you are in your journey. The second hack, tip, or resource is to use documentation and official guides, because when we use these guides, it provides even more information for us as we are looking to get more detailed explanations of how to use the programming language in its best practices. And so I would really advise, if you want to take this further, after this whole thing, you're going to get a taste of JavaScript today. Make sure that you are referencing the official documentation and guides, okay? Whether you do JavaScript, Python, or any other programming language. And then the third resource that I have here is use open source projects and communities, right? So you're in one right now. There are online communities, there's in-person communities, and you can get a really rich experience as you rub shoulders with other people who are wanting to take their coding journey very, very seriously. And so just wanted to like start off with that, because those were the things that helped me to move past the block that I was facing as a self-taught developer. But what is really cool is that today I'm actually here to teach JavaScript. And so let this be an encouragement for you. One day you may think it is the hardest thing ever. You don't know if you'll ever get through whatever your challenge is as you're learning to code, but there is another side to it, and you will get on the other side. And I just want to share that as, I guess, a testimony of what that can be for you. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and review a little bit of what we talked about last week in our first session. So last week we talked about what web development is, the web developer's role, the tools and the basic terms. And I would love to hear from some of you that were here last week as we talk about what the role of a web developer is. I would love to know, like, what do you remember from that? We talked about there are various roles specifically within web development. And we also talked about which ones might be more fitting for you depending on your personality and how you find yourself solving problems. So would love to hear from you in the chat. What do you remember from our time together? And I'm going to pull up my chat so I can see everything. So what do you remember? We talked about client side, we talked about server side, we talked about how some people like to work with both sides. Do you all remember what those terms were? What kind of developers are they? And it's okay if you weren't here, if you don't remember. I'll just take a moment to see if anyone can remember. And if not, it's okay. It was a whole week ago. So many things happened since then. Okay, let me remind you. We talked about how people who enjoy, okay, here they come. So we talked about front end. Yeah, so there are front end developers who typically are more visually minded. They like to see the work immediately, and typically are attracted to like color and typography and like to see beautiful sites and functional sites, okay? And then we also have the backend developer, who is more along the lines of someone who likes logic and doesn't necessarily care about how the front end works, how the user interacts with the website. They just care more about storing data, again, making sure the logic is set up so that all of the things that need to happen as far as like the engine of the website is happening the way it's supposed to, okay? So then there's some people who like to do both, and they're called full stack developers, all right? So full stack developers, they want to do the front end and the back end, and maybe they just enjoy doing it, or maybe they found themselves there because they know that it opens up more doors of opportunity where you can be a full stack, you can be a front end or a back end. And so we did talk about that last week. All right, so thank y'all so much for participating. I love participation. So sometimes I will ask questions so that you all can give me your feedback. And I love that Leslie shared this. Leslie said, I remember thinking I like both. I like to help people on the front end, and I'm also good at finding bugs. Yes, and that is something we talked about as well. So we'll get to that. Thank you for reminding me, Leslie. Another thing that we talked about were the web developer tools. Okay, so we'd love to hear from you. What tools did we discuss? I'll just give you some hints as you're sharing in the chat. We talked about some tools that actually help you to write and edit and commit your code. We talked about tools that will help you to collaborate with others, as well as have a remote space for you to save your code, download your code, and interact with others. And then we talked about a platform where you can basically have like a centralized communication with your team. Yes, so very good. So in the chat, people are mentioning VS Code, Slack, GitHub, IDEs. Excellent, excellent. Yes. And even if you weren't here, you're probably picking up what I'm throwing down. So I love that. Yeah. So we talked about those tools and how important that is as a developer. Then we talked about basic terms such as syntax, what programming languages are, why it's important for you to understand algorithms and have a problem-solving space in your mind as you are coding and programming. We talked about HTML and CSS, and we just talked briefly about JavaScript because today that's what we're going to focus on. And remember, HTML is more like the structure of your page or your application. So it involves the content. And then we have our CSS, which is how we style that particular web page or application, okay? And then JavaScript allows the user to interact with the front end in such a way where you will be able to maybe see data appear or data can be collected from the user. And so we're going to do a little bit of that as we continue our project for today. And so last week, some of you coded for the first time, or maybe for the 5th time or the 15th time. And for the most part, most of us that are here are beginner or even intermediate. And so as we continue to move into our project, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that we are going straight into JavaScript. We're going to continue what we did the last time, but we are going to use JavaScript and kind of modify our HTML a bit, okay? So here we go. We're jumping into JavaScript today. And what we need to know is that JavaScript is one of the programming languages that we use within the front end of web development, and it can also be used on the back end, okay? But we're focusing on the front end today. It is, again, a programming language for web interactivity, so the user can actually interact with the page or the application. So what that means is there is dynamic content, user interaction, and manipulation of HTML and CSS, okay? So if you're like, I don't really understand what that means, well, you're going to get it today. You're actually going to code today, so you will fully understand what this means. But before we begin actually going into the presentation, I would love for you to join me on codepen.io. I believe Amber's going to share the link in the chat. If you don't already have an account, I would encourage you to go ahead and set up an account. It takes maybe a minute or two. You can log in with your email, Gmail, or even connect with your GitHub, okay? And as you're doing that, you can also pick up where we left off if you did not have an opportunity to join us last week. There is a link to our project from last week. So if you did not have an opportunity to code, or maybe you weren't able to stay the whole time with us, this particular link that Amber will share will allow you to basically clone my project. Okay, so you'll be able to start where we left off, and then you're going to add on to the project today. Okay. So Amber, did you get that link? It's in the, it should be in that same chat.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I got the wrong one.
Okay, no worries. Thank you so much.
Um,
So go ahead and get into your code pen and we will. Did you need it again, Amber? Okay.
Oh, no, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Okay, so if you need it, there's the link right there. You can pick up where we left off from last week. Once you are able to get in the code pen, let me know. And I'm going to go ahead and show you what your code pen should look like when you first get in, okay? All right. All right, Dominic says they're in. And once you get there, it may look similar to this. I have it blown up so that everyone can see everything on the page. But once you're here, let me know. Once you're logged in, let me know in the chat so I can know when I need to continue. There is no rush here. I'll just wait for a couple of people, okay? Awesome. Leslie is in. And once you get in, there is an icon on the left side. And let me actually bring this out a little bit. It's actually this drop down here, and it might already be open, but once you click on that, you'll see pin, okay? And then there's another drop down, and you'll just click on pin again, and that will allow you to start a new one, okay? Awesome. I see that people are in. Perfect, perfect. All right. So as we are waiting, I just want to show you what we worked on last week, okay? So last week, we only did HTML and CSS. That was our focus. You'll see, you know, if you weren't able to join us, again, just make sure you copy my particular project. To do that, you'll go down to fork here, and then it will open up a new one where you can edit and do everything that you need to do there, okay? I would go ahead and name and save your project, and then we will get started, okay? So just to get an idea of what this should look like, remember, we are working on a recipe site or application. By the end of this will be essentially an application, a very simple application, okay? So peaches and cream oatmeal, we have all the content here. We styled it with CSS, and essentially this is what it looks like. And if you want to go through this on your own at another time, there is a replay that you'll be able to have access as well, okay? So as we are going through the content, the presentation, we are going to reference the presentation and then come back to our code pen, okay? So we're going to be going back and forth, and it's because as we are learning it, we're going to apply it immediately. Now you'll see we have an HTML panel, we have a CSS panel, and then over here I have a JS, which means JavaScript panel. So what I'm going to do is bring some space in so we can invite JavaScript back to the party. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the presentation, okay? All right. So one of the first things that we're gonna learn, because it's a quick win and it's pretty cool, okay? So with JavaScript, you can do something where you are getting user input from the person that is visiting your website or application, okay? You've probably seen something like what you see on the screen here, where there's a pop-up and you can put information in there. So we have a recipe on our screen. And right now it has one serving. It might not be a true one serving, but we're gonna go with one serving right now, okay? Now, what we're going to work on is actually using JavaScript to modify the recipe based on how many servings we need for our recipe. So right now, if we look at our recipe, it is static. There's nothing dynamic about it. You cannot change it. But what we're going to do is get information from the user with a prompt, okay? This is a very fun first way to jump into JavaScript because you'll see something that quick, okay? This prompt will allow you to have a dialog box where the user will put something in and whatever they put in automatically returns as a string. Okay, let's stop there. A string. There are different types of data that you can use in JavaScript, okay? That you can assign, that you can declare, and a string is one of them. Basically, a string is kind of like content, like text, okay? So like cat, Candice, computer, mirror, anything that is text, usually like a word or a sentence or a phrase, is a string, okay? But what if we're talking about a serving? We aren't necessarily asking people to write in words, but they are giving us a number. So with that, we actually have to modify our prompt. But before we do that, let's see how a prompt works, okay? So we're going to go over to our JavaScript, and right here, we're going to put in what is called a prompt. And I am going to put it here so you can see it, okay? All right, now, we have a prompt, and in the prompt, I have a string, okay? So this is actually a string that says enter the number of servings. Then I have a comma and I put 1 because I want it to populate with 1 already in there, okay? So you could write anything here. You could say, what is your name? And you could leave this blank. I think it's auto saving. Okay, so what is your name? Okay, you see it popped up, what is your name? And the user can now interact with the website or with the application. Okay, so if I were to put in my name, right now nothing happens because we haven't programmed, we haven't told the computer what to do. But we have something here called a prompt where we can get information from the user. So let's go back and put in our original prompt. Okay, and I'll put this in the chat as well. A prompt. Our prompt is enter the number of servings. It automatically has 1 as the input, but we can change that to anything. But we're going to leave it for now because we got to do a lot more work to make sure that this is going to be effective for what we're trying to do. Remember, we are developers. We're trying to solve a problem, okay? So there are steps to this. Okay, so we have a prompt, which is great, but the number is not a string. So we actually need to turn our input, whatever the user puts into this field, it needs to actually be an integer, a number, okay? So in order to do that, before the prompt, we're going to put parse int, and we're going to wrap everything in the parentheses, okay? And then let's make sure we put a semicolon after it because that is part of the syntax. Leslie, you have a question. Yes, ma'am.
I keep getting a pop-up that says an embedded page at cdpn.io says, and then wants me to do that.
Okay, so just push cancel because did you see how it kept popping up for me as well?
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, it will keep popping up. I think you have to turn off Okay, that's what it is. Auto save right here. So if everyone can try that, we'll see if that will cut it off so that it doesn't run automatically until you save it. So under the save or right beside the save, there's an arrow, and let's turn that off. Let's see that if that helps. But if it doesn't, just push the cancel button and then you can just continue. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So just to reiterate, remember when you get information from the user through a prompt, it's automatically going to be a string, but we need this to be a number, also called an integer. And so that's why we're using this parse int, and we're putting the prompt inside of our parentheses. Okay. And so I'm going to push cancel because we're not really doing anything with it right now. So again, the prompt is in the chat. You can copy that and then just add parse int to the beginning, okay? So that's pretty cool. You have some JavaScript already running for your project, okay? But we have some other things we need to do, okay? We have some other things we need to do. So let's see what else. All right, so the next thing we're gonna talk about, and remember, this is like a very general overview of JavaScript. There are so many other things that you can learn, but it's not going to happen here. I'll just let you know, you will not get everything you need here. We're just talking through how can we do something for our project today, okay? So the next thing we're going to talk about are variables, okay? If you remember when you were in math class, middle school, high school, you had like, let X equal 5. And then you might have, what is X plus 1? And then you would take that variable and plug it into X. X equals 5. So 5 plus 1 is 6. Okay. So basically that's what this is. Variables are basically containers that hold data storage. Okay. So just remember X equals blah, blah, blah. But in this case, we are actually going to do two things with our variables, okay? First, we have to declare a variable, and we do that by, if you look at this first box, we will say, use the keyword let for variable. So this lets us know that we're about to declare a variable, let, and then you name your variable, okay? Whatever you name your variable needs to be relevant to what you're doing. So in our case, we need to have a container, a box for our servings. So our variable is going to be let servings, all right? That declares a variable. Now we need to assign it. Now, we're not going to assign it. Our user is actually going to assign it. Okay. But if we were to assign it and we wanted to say let servings equal 2, then that means that our numbers for the amount of ingredients will be multiplied by 2, which I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But what if the user wants 3 or 17? We need to take that number from the prompt and assign it to a variable, okay? So one more thing about variables. You can use a variable to hold information and data about numbers, strings, objects, and so many more things, but we're just going to focus on the numbers and the strings right now, okay? So let's go back to our project. So right now we know that we need the user to tell us how many servings do they need for this particular recipe. And we know that we need it to be an actual integer. So this is going to make sure that this turns it into a number, that the computer knows that whatever they put in, this is a number. It's very important, okay? So let's assign whatever the input is for this to a variable. We're going to assign it to let servings equal whatever is inputted into the prompt, okay? So now we have this container that has a label on it, serving. Let's put an S on there, servings. It won't stop. Let's put an S. Okay, let servings equal whatever that number is that will be inputted by the user, okay? Let's go ahead and save. Just save it. Now, we know that we are not assigning the servings. The user is, we get that from the prompt, okay? We're good there. So there's some other things that we need to do. Let's go back over to our presentation. All right. Another thing we need to do is learn about functions, okay? Functions in JavaScript are basically, it is a process. It is like the algorithm, okay? It is a reusable block of code that you use for specific tasks. So whatever you program for, you code for your function, you can call that function over and over rather than writing out all the code that is in that block, okay? So I like to think of functions like it's like a Coke machine, okay? You know what happens when you put it used to be a quarter, but now it's like debit cards and all kinds of stuff. But when you activate your payment, there's something that happens inside of the Coke machine that puts out your Coke or your Pepsi or your Sprite or whatever. But you can't just walk up to a Coke machine and expect that it's just going to drop something. You have to invoke it. You have to call it. You have to do something, okay? So when we write functions, that's not enough. We actually have to invoke it. We have to do something to activate the function, okay? But first, we need to define it. We need to define it, and then we can call the function. So when we think about what are we trying to do here, we are trying to get the user to tell us how many servings they need for the recipe. And then something will happen that will change the information in our recipe, the amount of ingredients. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a function, okay? Our function is going to update the ingredients because right now, let's look at our thing. Right now, for one serving, we have 2 cups. We have 1/3 a cup, 2. So these numbers will change based off of the particular servings. So let's go ahead and start writing our function. Remember, our function is going to have a block of code, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to give this some space here. And just like we use the word let to get it as a keyword for a variable, we're going to use the word function as a keyword to let the computer know that we are about to write a function. You need to name your function something that makes sense. Now, when you write this name, we use something called camel case, okay? So that means that we will start whatever the name is. In this case, I'm going to call it update ingredients. So your first word is going to start with the lowercase, and then your second word is going to start with uppercase, okay? So we have function update ingredients. We're going to have parentheses there. That lets us know that this is a function. Now, when you start to learn more about functions, you'll be able to put some information in those parentheses, but we're not going to go there. I'm not going to overwhelm you, okay? So we have a function. The name is update ingredients. We have the parentheses to let us know this is a function. And then we're going to do something that looks very similar to what you've seen before in CSS. It's going to be these double braces, open and close braces, okay? And we're going to put some space there. Now, think about when you go to a Coke machine, you need something to happen. Okay? When we go to this website, we need something to happen. Okay? How do we call this function? We need something to activate whatever this function is going to be, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to actually add something to our HTML before we finish over here. Let's go over to our HTML. We're going to add something that's going to help us out here, because we don't want that prompt just to come up like it is right now. Right now, it's just off the chain. It's just going everywhere. In fact, let's solve that for a second. Let's take let servings, and it equals our prompt. Let's take that and let's put it inside the function, because nothing can happen until we actually call the function, we activate the function. So let's put it there, and we shouldn't have any more trouble for a while, okay? So, but in order to get the prompt to start, we need to activate it. We need to invoke it. We need to call this function. So we're going to go over to our HTML, and we're going to add a button, okay? This button is going to activate, invoke this function, so that when you press it, when you click it, it is going to run the code inside of that block here, okay? Which is going to be the prompt. So let's go over here. Let's look and see where might there be a good place to put the button. I would think that we need to add a button maybe right above ingredients. And we also need to let people know how many servings this is. This is something we did not do that is very important here. So let's actually add two things. Let's add the serving size that this recipe is currently, and then let's add a button that people can press if they want to update the servings, okay? So we'll do it together. Let me get some of the stuff off my screen. So yes, Kenneth, yes, anytime you write JavaScript, you should have it within script tags. And the cool thing about this particular code pen is that everything that's in this particular panel is already in the script tag, so we don't have to write that. But yes, you are correct. Anytime we write JavaScript code, it needs to be within script. Yep. All right, so we are going to add, let's add the word serving size in paragraph text. Right, let's see. Let's do it right above ingredients. So let's give us some space. Okay. So last week we talked about when you want to write paragraph text, which is just basically, you know, the normal size text on a page, you put it within a opening and closing tag, and we're going to save it. And let's look at what it looks like. Okay, so we have serving size, and we want it to be a particular serving size, right? So let's go ahead and put 1, because we know it's 1 serving size. But that 1 is going to change, and we kind of need to make sure that in our HTML, we are allowing it to be accessed by JavaScript when we need it to change, okay? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to wrap this in a span tag. So what this does is it's an inline element. So it will not put it on a new line, but it's going to keep it on the same line. But it allows us to add, remember how last week we added classes, right? In this particular case, we actually need to add an ID, okay? So the difference between a class and an ID is that the class can be used more than once. But in this case, this is a very specific task that we're trying to accomplish. And so we don't want to use it more than once. We're going to use it as an ID, an identifying it's identifying this span as unique, and we're going to do something very unique here. So we're going to write ID equals, and we're going to put our quotations here, and we need to give it a name. What is our ID going to be? It needs to be very relevant for what we're doing. So this is a serving size, right? Whatever number is here is going to be a serving size. And we're going to do it in camel case, serving size. Let me just pull this out a little bit so you can see it. Okay, so we have serving size, colon. This is still on the same line, 1, because that's what our recipe is right now. But we need to change it eventually, and this is going to allow us to do that in JavaScript. So let's save it, and let's go over here and see what we got. All right, serving size 1. Okay. Now we need to add a button. Let's add a button right below that. So we have our paragraph. And so another really cool HTML element that you can use is button. So we're just going to write button, open and closing tag. And whatever you want your button to say as its identifier. So right here, we're going to put update serving size, or just, how did I do it? Servings. Update servings, okay? We're gonna save. Let's see what it looks like. And if you wanna check on yours, you can slide it up like that after you save it, or you can put it on a separate window by clicking there, or a separate tab, and just make sure you refresh it. So as you can see, we have serving size 1. And if you want to update your servings, you would click that. But we need to we need to write code that will let the computer know when we click this, we need something to happen, because right now, nothing is happening. Okay? Nothing is happening. Kenneth, yes. As far as the IDE, where you can have split view of code and live preview, you can use VS Code. And I can't remember what the extension is, but you're able to do the same. Yes. And we talked a little bit about that. And today we're keeping it simple so that we can get through the project, and also because this might be the first time for some people, and this makes it super easy. Okay. But great question. All right. So for our button, it's just a button. We have nothing attached to it. But one thing that we can do is use what's called on click. So we're going to, again, write something that is going to happen when we click on it. So on click is equal to, just put our quotes. What do we want it to do? We actually want it to run this function, right? We want someone to press the button. On the click, something's going to happen. It's going to call this function, update ingredients, and whatever code is on the inside is going to run. You've probably noticed we don't keep getting that pop-up right now, right? Because we haven't called it. We haven't put the coin in the Coke machine yet. So nothing's going to happen until we make it happen. How does the user make it happen? They're going to click on the button that says update servings. So on click is going to equal, we're going to write the name of the function here, okay? Update ingredients. You can just copy it, include the parentheses, and put it inside of your quotes there, okay? Let's save it. And I will put this in the chat just in case someone wants to check their code with mine. Okay, and let me know if you're still on the same page with me. Give me a thumbs up if you're like, I'm following. Okay, let me know that you're still here, you're working with me. Okay, I need a little feedback. I know I've done a lot of talking. Yay! Okay, yes, and I love to see it in your little square too. So thank you, Leslie. Or Latanya, sorry. Yes, and thank you, Leslie. Awesome. Okay, so we have saved what we have. So let's test it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we're going to go over here. We're going to refresh our page. We've done some stuff here. So we have the serving size is currently 1. Update servings. Look, when you press it, we have called the function. And so now it says enter the number of servings. Okay, so we're going good. Enter the number of servings. But the problem is when I put in a number, nothing happens right now. It still says 2. It still says 1/3. It still says 2. But we're about to fix that, okay? All right, so we are actually going to write. Oh, you're not seeing my prompt. Oh, I know why. I know why, because it's a separate window. So let me see if I can pull up my desktop. Or actually I think I have my desktop up. So I think the reason why you're not able to see my prompt is because it's like a whole nother, it's like a whole nother page basically. But are you seeing the prompt? Let me know, are you seeing your prompt when you click on the button? That will be the question. Okay, great. It would be awesome though if y'all could see it when it pops up. But if it's popping up for you, you're on the right track. Okay, great, love it. Okay, so I'm not gonna worry about it then. I'm not even gonna worry about it because y'all got it. Yes, it is like an alert. So an alert, the difference between an alert and a prompt is that an alert will just be like a statement. You can't interact with it. An alert is like, here's something important. Here's something I want to tell you, but you can't. Yeah. So the prompt will prompt the user to give some input. That is a great question though. Yep. Okay. So one other variable that we need to do is we need to set a variable to change the serving size. Okay. Now we're really getting into JavaScript now. So we need to write a variable that is going to allow this number to change based off of the number that the user puts in, okay? So if we put in a 2 here, which you can't see, but I'm putting in a 2, it would change the serving size automatically. So what we need to do is, let's go to our code. We're gonna write another variable because when someone puts in the serving size, we need it to be captured into a container called let serving size, element, okay? The reason why I'm calling it serving size element is because this is an element, okay? This is an element with an opening and closing tag of a span, okay? So it just helps me to identify it's relevant. You can call it something else. If this is your first time doing JavaScript, I would say just name it exactly how I name mine so that you don't get mixed up. And but yeah, you'll be able to see what we're going to do with it in just a moment. So we're going to leave that there for a moment and let's go back to our presentation. You've written the function, you know how to define it and call it by using the onClick, but we got to do something else. We have to update the HTML content. Okay, I remember when I learned this, I was like, what kind of magic is this? Okay, so we are going to dynamically update the HTML content. What that means is right now we have a number 1. We're going to use JavaScript to change that without going into the HTML and changing it, okay? It's all based off of the user input. How are we going to do that? Well, it is by using what's called the document object model. It is how you interact with the interface of web documents. It will look like what you see here, okay? So we have a variable, or in this case, we're calling it let. I should have changed that there. I don't want you to be confused. Let serving size element equals, And we are going to write the word document so that we know we're looking at our HTML document. So that's where we're starting. And we're going to get what we need by finding the element that has this ID, okay? We're going to the document, the HTML document. We're getting the element by this ID. There's only one element that has this ID, serving size. Remember where we put that? ID equals serving size. So when we write that, it's going to allow us to see, oh, it's going to target whatever is within this because it has the ID of serving size, okay? Document get ID, element by ID, serving size, colon. And then, because we have declared and assigned this variable, we're going to add on dot text content. This will allow us to change the content of whatever is attached to this variable. Okay, so let's go over here and we're going to write it out together. Okay, so we started, let serving size element, it's going to equal, make sure I have it here. It is going to equal, it's on the slide, but I'm going to put it in the chat for y'all. Okay, so this is the first line after the equals. It's in the chat. I'm going to write it here. Okay. Make sure we have the colon after. And I'm going to close this up a little bit so we can see everything. So we are targeting this ID of serving size, whatever is inside, by going to the document, getting the element ID, serving size, and then we're going to go on a new line and we're going to take that variable. Remember, anytime we declare and assign a variable, it's in its own container. So now we can go back to that container. So we're going to write serving size element dot text content. This is used so that we know that we're going to modify it, okay? It's going to equal servings, okay? What that means is the serving size element is going to change the text content based off of the servings. Where do we get the servings from? This is another variable. It's whatever the user puts into the prompt, okay? So if the user puts in 10, that's automatically going to change right there where it says serving size. So let's try it out. Let's try it out. Let's go to our page. We're going to refresh. Okay, we don't want 1. Remember, the prompt does not come up unless we invoke it, unless we call it. How does it get called? We click on the update servings. I'm going to put in the number 2. You can't see my prompt, but try it on your end. And I'm going to push OK. And guess what happens? You see, it changed to 2. That's perfect. That's what we want to happen. But this stuff isn't changing yet. So what do we do? What do we do? Basically, what we're going to do is the same thing we did up here. And we are going to change with that document object model and the variable. We're going to change this by multiplying whatever that serving size is by this number. Okay. So let's walk through it because there's a lot of them. So you'll probably understand as we do more and more of them. So we need to go back over to our HTML. And every time we have a number for our ingredients, it needs to be changed. So we need to have an ID for each one of them. I will give you a hint for the first one. Okay. This list item is the oats. Okay. So we need to have an ID equal to Let's just call it oats, okay? We need an ID to attach to, remember right here, document.getElementById. This is where that's going to go, okay? But let's get our HTML all set up. So we're going to go over here. We're going to do the same thing. What are we going to call this? We'll call it, some people call it pecans, some people call it pecans. I'm from Georgia and most people say pecans. I don't know. What do you say? Do you say pecans or pecans? I would love to know in the chat. And we're just going to go through and put all of our IDs. Okay, Leslie's with me. Pecans. I love it. All right, so all we're doing really is just identifying what is the ingredient, right? What is the ingredient? And then we're going to just put that there. And you can abbreviate if you want. It's really up to you. But each one of these needs an ID so that we can identify it in our JavaScript and so that it will change as needed, okay? And we don't need to do it for the optional part because there's no number there, right? So yeah, okay. Now, once you have ID'd all of your list items in your HTML, make sure you save, okay? And then what we need to do, and it's going to feel kind of repetitive, but it's going to make more sense as we do it. And this is the last part, y'all. Like once we get this done, we're done. So we're going to go back over here to our JavaScript. And I like to give it a little space so that I know that I am, you know, working still within, you still need to be within the function, remember? So whatever we call, it's got to happen within the function. The code has to happen within the function if that's what we want to happen. So giving it some space, we're still within those braces or those brackets. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that same thing that we used before, where we're going to do document. We're referring to the document. We need to get the element by ID. What is the first ID that we need? It's the oats. So we're going to put it in parentheses. And then within the parentheses, because it's a string, we're going to put oats, okay? Well, not because it's a string, I apologize, because it is an ID that we're identifying, we're gonna put oats, okay? So you basically can just copy this and put it here. And because we want to change that text, we're going to go ahead and add on the text content, text, capital C, our camel case, okay, equals servings. Why are we using the word servings there? Because whatever that input is, remember our user is putting in the number of servings. We want that number to be inserted there, okay? Times, we're going to use an asterisk. It's the 8. It's the, when you go into shift 8, it's that star or the asterisk. And we're going to multiply it by whatever the original number is, okay? So when we look at our oats, because we're working with our oats right now, the original for one serving is 2, right? So if someone were to put in 2 servings in the prompt, it would multiply 2 times the original 2, okay? But remember, it's changing all of that content, right? It's changing all of that content within that list item. So what we need to do is make sure it doesn't just put 2, it needs to also put cups old-fashioned rolled oats, okay? So what we're going to do is it's called concatenate. We're going to add it on. We're going to add on the rest of what we need after the 2. So we need we need to make it a string, okay? And I know this is a lot. I'm teaching you a lot at once, but this is a taste. And if you are understanding just a little bit, when you really get into it, I think you're gonna be a lot further than I was. So, all right, so we have 2. And then we're going to put a space because we don't want the 2 to be right next to the content. We need a 2, and then we need space. And then we're going to put in whatever the words are after that original number, which is 2 in this case, okay? All right. And for the syntax, we just need to put in a semicolon. All right. We're going to do that for all of the different ingredients. Okay. Let's do another one slowly together. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste so that you can get the rest of them because we're kind of running out of time. But let's do the next one. So we've done the oats. So next we need to do the pecans. I'm going to stick with that. So we're going to do document dot. We're going to the document, HTML document. We're getting the element by ID. Which one are we going for? We're going for the pecans. We want to change the text content. So we're going to do period, text content equals whatever servings the user puts into the prompt. Okay, remember that's going to be stored in our variable container to reference times what is the original number, okay, times 1/3. So you just put a 1/3, which is really 1 divided by 3. Okay. Now, something that we're going to do with this one that we don't necessarily have to do with the others, 1/3 is a repeating decimal. It'll always just have 0.33333. It never stops. Okay. We don't need all those 3s. We only need at most 2. Okay. We could turn it into a fraction, but that will require us to go to a JavaScript library or to create another function, which we don't have time for. So what we're going to do is we recognize that our fractions are going to turn into decimals, and that's okay. We're smart enough. We know how to use decimals. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually put this one, not all the others, but just this one, our servings times the 1/3 in parentheses. And we want it to only go to 2 decimal places. So we are going to write 2 fixed. And then in the parentheses, we're letting it know we want it to be fixed or stop at 2 decimal places, okay? All right, that's a little extra. We are not going to do that for the other ones. And then we're going to do the plus. Remember, this is where we're concatenating. We're going to put our space, and then we're going to copy and paste the rest of the text there after the space within the quotations. Then our semicolon. All right. It's very tedious, but it's going to be magic when we're done. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just actually going to copy and paste the rest of the code for the other elements that we are getting by ID in the chat. All right. And I encourage you to take the time to think about why this is like this. That's why I wanted us to walk through the first 2. But you'll see that it's basically the same thing. We're just identifying a different ID each time, and we are taking the original number, the amount of the ingredients times the input of the servings from the prompt. Okay. So go ahead and put that in. If you're using what I just posted in the comments, do not, just make sure that you don't copy all of this. You're only copying from here down and pasting, okay? and you should save it. And we are going to make sure it works. Let's see if it works, okay? So let's go to, make sure you save it and make sure you are refreshing your screen. Okay, so right now our peaches and cream oatmeal breakfast recipe is showing 1 serving size. This is kind of a lot for one person, so you're welcome to modify that in the HTML, maybe just cut everything in half. But we're going to go with it. We're a hungry person. So we're gonna go for it. We're clicking our update servings. Let's say that I want to do 4 servings. So in my input, I'm going to put 4. It is going to take that number and make sure that it is read as a number. And I push OK, and it updated everything. So now all the original numbers were multiplied by 4. And this is the new recipe, or the new recipe with the updated ingredients. Again, I don't know how true this recipe is. So if you want to get a true recipe, go back to the original and maybe modify it. But it has multiplied all of these by 4. If we want to go back to 1, I'm going to put in 1, enter. It's taking everything back. And you'll notice that the fractions are now decimals, but it's still the equivalent, right? So originally this was 1/3, this was 1/4, this was 1/8. And this was 3 1/2. So you have a little recipe app here, and it is using JavaScript. So let me know in the chat if you were able to complete our JavaScript portion for our project today, our mini project. Okay, Dominique says, yay. Okay, good. Love it, love it. Awesome. Well, you did JavaScript. Thank you for following along with me. I think we only have like a few minutes. And so I want to make sure that like any questions you might have about the project, or if there was something that you missed or you need clarification on, please let me know. I would love to answer those for you. But basically we are in our Q&A. Yeah, I kind of talked about this at the beginning. Next steps, if you want to update or do a little bit more with your project here, you can try rebuilding the project from scratch. If you're like, I really enjoyed this, I want to make sure I understand it, you could add on features. You can sign up for a JavaScript course. But those are some things that you can do to kind of take this a bit further. But let me check in the... Okay, how do you add comments to HTML code without interfering with the code? That is a great question. So let's go back to our HTML. So there's a couple ways you can do it. So most of the time in a code editor, if you want to add comments, you can actually push, I know on the Mac, you can push Command and the front slash, and it will automatically put what you need there. Or you can just, do it manually. So you have it's, the same thing that you use for your opening and closing tags, then the exclamation point, and then dashes, and then you write your code here. Write your comment here. And then you close it like this. And then everything that you have here will not affect your code. That is a great question. Okay. You're welcome. Where would the input box pop up to change a serving size? It should pop up like immediately on your screen. So like you're not able to see mine. I'm sorry about that, but like once you click on it, it should be front and center on your screen, like at the top. And it should look like, let me show you. Oops. It should look exactly like this. Did you have a issue with your input, your prompt? If so, let me know. And maybe you can compare it to the code that I shared in the original, because it's all updated now. It should be the same. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Any other questions? Okay. Does anybody want me to share their project? Okay, yes. Awesome. Would anybody like for me to share their project? I think we did this last time and it was pretty cool. If so, you can share your link and I will put it on the screen. All right, so we have Bishwa. All right. Ooh, I like the color. Awesome. Okay. So you have your button here. And I know you can't see the prompt, but I'm just going to try it out. I'm going to do 2 servings and there we go. It works. Congratulations. Awesome. Awesome. Dominique, I'm going to share yours as well. This is so fun. All right. All right. Let's go to, okay. I'm going to bring this up so we can see it. All right. So I'm going to click update and change it to 2, and we see that it has changed. Awesome job. Great job, Dominique. Anybody else? Yes, I love it. I love it. Well, if there are not any other questions, I did want to invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I haven't been as often or as active in the past week or 2, just because I've had some workshops to prepare for, but I really love LinkedIn. I share a lot about where I am in my tech journey. Now as a founder of a web development company, I will actually be bringing on my first interns next month, and that's pretty exciting. So if you want to follow me and hear about the things that I'm up to and what I'm learning, please follow me, and also DM me if you have any questions or if there's anything that you would like to collaborate on. All right. But yeah, that's all I got for tonight. I hope you all enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Candice.
Thank you so much, Candice.
For sure.
sure to-
Thank you all. Well, I hope
Thanks,
y'all.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.